Hello and welcome to the Psych Leadership Podcast, the show that helps you understand the psychology of growth, leadership, and making big moves in your life and career. As always, my name's Luke Upchurch. I'm so happy that you took time out of your day to hang out with me. So what are we talking about today? We're talking about why trust is a superpower in teams. So this is something that, in my opinion, doesn't get a lot of credit. We don't talk about this as much as a performance variable. A lot of times folks think of trust as more this fluffy version, inspirational poster on your break room wall. But when trust is high in a team, creativity expands, autonomy increases, and the entire bench strength gets stronger. What about when trust is low? Well, you get guarded communication, service-level collaboration, and people trying to protect their own reputations instead of solving problems. You get a lot of this, what I call empire building, right? Teams that, I'm building something over here, and even though your other team, your colleagues could help me with it, I'm going to hold it close to chest because I'm looking out for my own legacy, for my own paycheck, right? My career trajectory, not the trajectory of the team, but being selfish. And so if we solve trust, if we build that, everything else kind of falls into place, if you will. So an easy example of this, just thinking in everyday life, any of you that watch sports teams, I want you to picture your favorite team. Whoever you root for, whoever your schedule revolves around on the weekends and things like that, at some point, the team that you support has gotten a new coach, right? Well, think about those first few games when the team is still getting to know their new leader. They're still trying to figure out his or her style, and it's usually a little rocky, right? At least in the movies, the coach always wins over the team, right? Think of your Ted Lasso or something like that. The coach eventually wins over the team, and suddenly they're firing on all cylinders. They're winning trophies, things like that. Well, that all comes from trust. And in real life, the teams never actually hit that equilibrium. They don't find that balance right away with the new coach unless the coach enables that. If we take this into the career or the business domain, the story becomes a little bit different, but the outcome is ultimately the same. Trust is cyclical in nature. And what I mean by that is that if a leader exhibits trust in the team performs faster, stronger, better because of that trust, which further solidifies the trust that the leader exhibited. Right. So the team eventually they get to this point at a subconscious level. They want to live up to the trust. The leader has said, I'm putting you up on a pedestal. I believe that you're capable of great things. And even if the team maybe isn't quite there yet, they want to be. They want to work together. They want to move towards that. Countless studies have shown that this isn't just a flash in the pan type of situation, that this happens on a regular basis, that if a leader insists on control, on micromanaging so that you get the results from your team that you want, the inability for that team to make decisions, it eventually gets to the point that they play this mother may I game. Right? They ask the leader for permission. They ask the leader to tell them what their opinion is, to tell them how to solve problems. So if that sounds familiar to you, either as a team member, if you're thinking of your boss when I describe that, or maybe you're pointing those fingers at yourself, what you've really done there is you've created a bunch of carbon copies of yourself, a bunch of people that filter all of their decisions through the funnel of what would the boss say. Their creativity is then left on the cutting room floor because you didn't allow space for that. So let's unpack that a little bit further. Recent organizational research has consistently shown that trust predicts creative collaboration. And why is that? Well, because creativity ultimately requires risk, right? When somebody proposes an idea in a team, they're exposing incomplete thinking most of the time, right? They have this concept. They haven't fully fleshed it out. They're just throwing it to the wall to see what sticks. And they're risking being wrong. They're risking looking naive or just risking failure, right? So if the environment doesn't feel safe, the brain defaults to protection. People withhold ideas, they stay quiet, they offer only safe solutions. But when trust is present, psychological safety then increases, and the psychological safety allows those folks, those team members, to take interpersonal risk without being punished or humiliated. And folks, that's ultimately the soil where innovation grows. Trust reduces the cost of speaking up. And when the cost goes down, idea volume goes up. It increases, right? Because you've given them the permission space to fail fast. Ladies and gentlemen, this bleeds right into the concept of trust fueling autonomy. And we've talked about this a lot in the podcast, right? The concept of self-determination theory and the idea that if we want to unlock intrinsic motivation, we need to lean on the ABCs here: autonomy, belonging, and competence. Well, here we're focused specifically on autonomy. And I need you to understand here, autonomy is not the same as being independent. Autonomy is freedom to exercise judgment within a shared goal. So you still have guardrails for your team. You're not just saying go out there and do and not putting parameters around that. But research in organizational psychology over the last few years shows that when team members trust one another and leadership exhibits that same trust, that they experience a higher level of engagement, greater intrinsic motivation, because trust reduces surveillance. So as a leader, I don't have to micromanage. I don't have to check in on my team constantly because I trust that they're doing their job, which if you think of this in opportunity cost, right? If I don't trust my team, then I'm constantly double checking on them. If I'm always double checking on them, well, then who's doing my job, right? Because I'm just babysitting them. Who is going out there doing the things that I'm supposed to do? When people feel micromanaged, they conserve energy. They comply. They do the minimum necessary to avoid error. And when trust is persistent, or is present rather, people feel ownership. They lean in, they experiment, they want to solve beyond their job description, because it ultimately it shifts us from this mindset of compliance to commitment. So then what is the outcome of that long term? Well, this takes a while to build, and I need you to understand this. This is not a flip a switch and we have instant growth in this space. But over time, trust is going to build what I call bench strength. When I say bench strength, I'm going to go back to our sports team analogy, right? If I only have one goal scorer, one point guard, et cetera, if that person gets hurt, doesn't feel well today, does that mean that the team just fails? Well, yeah, because I've set it up for failure, because I've put all of that skill set all in that one individual. Well, bench strength says each of my team members, maybe they still have a primary job, but they also, because they were a part of the solution, because they work together on the outcomes, if somebody is out of the office because they're sick, because they're taking a vacation, because they got promoted, any of those things, well, then we have bench strength. I have somebody else that can step up and take that on. Now, some of that, mind you, it's going to rest on your processes, right? I have to still have documentation about what the person was working on, what the outcomes were, what the goals, the parameters, etc. All those things still have to be documented such that anybody can pick it up and run with it. And this is standard scaled agile framework, Six Sigma methodology, those kind of things. So we've talked about that in the past in the process improvement domain. But if I also have trust, then that improves the team's overall resilience. We get to this space of knowledge sharing because it increases the overall accessibility and the acceleration of the team, the velocity of the team. We're all sharing information because we want to collectively achieve. We're not looking at it as an individual thing. We're not in that empire building of, again, I have to hold this information close because God forbid somebody outpace me. Right? If I trust my team, people are more likely to share their expertise. They're likely to admit when they have gaps and be humble enough to raise a hand and ask for input, to ask for help. That cross-pollination ultimately will build our bench strength. And bench strength is not just having talented individuals, it's having interchangeable capability. It's knowing that if one person is out, the team doesn't just fall apart, right? This only happens when knowledge flows freely, and the knowledge flows freely when trust is high. Low trust teams hoard information, and high trust teams are going to ultimately distribute that. So this is also something I want you to think about as you are seeking to expand into a new team, especially. I typically look at this when I first come on a team. I like to sit back and kind of observe, right? That observational experimentation, if you will, where I just sit back, shut up, and watch the dynamics at play. If people come up with a new idea and they share it openly, then you already know what you're dealing with, right? If everybody holds that close to the chest, you've got some work to do. So why does this matter for those that are early in career? Let's keep unpacking this a little bit. So if you're new to career, I really need you to understand how powerful the concept of trust can be, not just for your growth today, but for your overall career trajectory. You do not build influence by proving rather that you're the smartest person in the room. You build influence by contributing to the psychological safety of that team. So again, if you are just joining a team, when I talk about sitting back and kind of observing, that is really a good first step. It lets you know where the team is and kind of where you can fit in. And so, for example, if I'm brand new on a team, the gut feeling that everybody has is I'm the new person. I need to prove myself. I need to prove to these folks that I deserve a seat at this table, especially if you were in a dynamic that maybe somebody else on that team interviewed for the job that you just took. Right. So they're thinking to themselves, okay, this guy or this gal, whoever just got the job I wanted, are they worth it? Are they really better than me? Well, not to say that you're better than them. Maybe you showed up better than them. Maybe your experience is better than them. Or, it could have been a myriad of other things. But so how do you build that trust right away, especially when you're coming in Joe New Guy, right? So one of the easiest things is acknowledging somebody else's idea. Asking a clarifying question without a defensive posture. So one of the things that I typically do is I'll say, hey, I'm gonna play the new guy card. Help me understand where you're coming from. I think I understand your angle, but I'd love to hear it from you. And most of the time, I find that I had a good guess at where the person was coming from, where their idea is generating, and so on. But chances are they've got experience that you hadn't even considered. They're looking at it, yes, from the angle that you were, but there's a little bit of plus this, plus that, right? So to that end, it's important that you admit when you don't know something, that you share credit publicly. All these behaviors are going to signal safety, and safety fuels collective intelligence. Collective intelligence is an outcome of trust. Okay. So now let's pivot just a little bit. I want to talk to you about a short-term implementation plan. Let's make this actionable. So if trust is your superpower, how do we strengthen it over this next week? I'm going to give you 4 practices that I really want you to think about through the course of your work week. So first, in your next team interaction, I want you to verbally validate a contribution before evaluating it. So when somebody suggests an idea, I want you to use terminology like, That's an interesting angle, or hey, let's explore that. Can you walk me through your thinking? This immediately lowers the threat response in the room. It says, I'm not challenging you, I'm seeking to understand. And that's a big difference, right? If somebody suggests an idea and I say, hey there, sorry to interrupt right in the middle of the podcast. I just wanted to say that if you are enjoying this content, I'm going to encourage you to donate to Rise Up Academics. Not only do we create internship and leadership positions, mentoring opportunities for high school and college students, but we also have different conferences that we give, different lessons that we go out and give to the high schools. So if you want to be part of supporting that, click that donate button for me. 100% of the proceeds go straight there. I'm not taking a salary out of any of this. So all of your money goes straight to supporting the students. Thank you. Back to the show. Explain that. It's different than saying, let's explore that. If I say, what were you thinking? Well, that's completely different than saying, you know what, that's an interesting angle. I hadn't thought of it that way. Can you take me through that? Can you walk me through your thinking? Okay. So increase idea safety. Next, I want you to manage micro vulnerability. So this sounds more difficult than it is, folks, but I'm going to ask you to admit a small uncertainty. So I'm not fully confident in this approach. What am I missing? I use this a lot with my team. And frankly, it's because in my day job, my team is much more technical than I am, right? I'm in an IT facing role. I understand enough to at least be in the room, but these guys have forgotten more about coding than I will ever know or care to know for that matter. They're just in a different headspace than me. And so when they start describing a solution, I might understand part of it, but it's important to let them know that I'm leaning on their expertise. That if I had all the answers and I just wanted them to be a parrot, then I'm kind of missing the point, right? So I use that approach a lot to say, hey, I think I know where you're heading. Can you tell me what I'm missing? Or, hey, I want to make sure that we're meeting the customer where we're at. You're approaching this from a very technical perspective. Can you talk to me about how it solves the member or the customer complaint or the thing that we're trying to go after here? So research shows that if we appropriately show vulnerability, it's going to increase perceived leadership effectiveness and not decrease it. So a lot of folks, especially when they're trying to cut their teeth, new enroll, they don't want to admit that they're not the smartest person. They think to themselves, well, gosh, I went out and I got this big fancy degree. Now I've got to flex a little bit. A degree teaches you how to learn. And the first lesson in learning anything is admitting that you don't know everything. Admitting being comfortable and aware of what you do not know. And so when you show this, it's not showing that you don't deserve the title, that you don't deserve the position. It's showing that you are humble enough to be aware of what you don't know. And by opening that door, by you being vulnerable, it gives them the permission space to do the same. And so, again, going back to the example of the team that I work with, although I might not know all the technical stuff, I have a good business sense. I have a good strategy sense because of my experience, especially with this particular company. And so when I show that vulnerability, then that also opens them up to say they understand the technical spot, but maybe they need some extra support on the business strategy spot, right? It allows both of us to collectively work together. And you know what we just did, folks? We just built our bench strength. Now they at least understand through our conversation. I know their perspective from a technical space. They know my perspective from the strategic space. So if one of us isn't in the room, the other can at least not break the machine. right? That's not to say that they're going to run in and take my job as the strategy guy. I'm not going to take their job as the technical guy, but I also don't want to screw up the machine that they built by misrepresenting what they have designed. I need just enough to speak intelligently and then to say, you know what, I'm fighting above my weight class. I'm going to need so and so in the room to get into that technical component. All right. So, some other things that we'll talk about. I'm going to ask you then to share knowledge proactively. So, instead of holding on to insight, I want you to distribute it. Send out a resource, document a process, explain your reasoning. Again, this is a core principle here of building bench strength. Last item for you is to audit your reaction speed. So, when somebody makes a mistake, how fast do you move to criticism? I want you to pause. Curiosity before correction builds trust faster than perfection ever will. All right, folks. Well, that is all the time that we have for today. Again, thank you for hanging out. Thank you for making an investment in your career and growth, and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye. Hey, you made it all the way to the end of the podcast. Thanks so much for your time today. If you like this content, I'm going to ask that you consider a small donation. Every little bit helps, but this allows us to continue not only doing the podcast, but actually offering the internship positions, the leadership conferences, as well as the in person courses that we deliver to high school and college students. Think about hitting the donation button for me. And again, we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.